morning. Good morning, guys. Good morning. Well, DN couldn't make it because DN has something to do. So I'm alone. But it's fine. All I'm here for is to read. And today we are indeed starting a new book called The Gas Cap by Takashi Hiraide. Good morning, Melanges. Hey, I haven't seen you for a long time. Good morning. Where have you been? Huh? How's everyone's morning been? How's everyone doing? You've been in school? Aww. To be young again and happy. Finally, day off from school? That's very good to know. Melange, do I know you in game or anywhere else? Or you are just like someone I stumble upon in the Twitch channel? Oh, Mia Melange. Okay, sorry, I have some. I'm not bragging or anything, but yeah, sometimes there are just too many people that I sometimes don't remember. My apologies. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Are you excited? Are you guys excited for a new book? It's about a cat. I think people really like reading about cats, huh? Like, or what cat things or anything related to cats, stuff like that. Whenever I see names like that, I just automatically try to pronounce it as like French, like melange, like lingerie. Oh my god, suddenly 5 viewers. Hello, good morning everyone. Good morning, good morning. Are we Good morning everyone. So if you guys are new to my channel, I do reading content whereby I read a book to people. Therefore it's called Noodibles, which is a play on words on Audible. Um my voice is not exactly the best, and my pronunciation is bullshit. But I hope you guys will enjoy my reading nonetheless. Um, I just like reading to people. That's all. So I hope you guys are will enjoy the reading session with me. And I usually do a little chit chat until like 11 past 11, then I'll start reading. How's everyone's morning been? Ando, I still haven't gotten the time to visit your cafe. It's terrible. I've been trying to farm Agleia like every single day, like just to get my ninja chess piece. And on because I've been farming for my ninja chess piece, that my ninja skills now right now is like fucking top notch, bro. I got like a fucking 90k Hyosho Ranyu the other day, and I was like, wait, is it the other day or was it just now? Cause I can't tell, cause I'm stupid. Like my memory, I have memory issues now. Basically, I can't remember shit, bro. Let me see. That should be something. I gotta change the log, the battle one. Like battle that damage dealt by you, fail attacks by you, damage that you are dealt. Or other party member don't give a shit. Alliance member also don't give a shit. Other playable character don't give a shit. Actions damage dealt by fail attacks by engaged enemies. Different PCs. Why does it have so much shit on? Hmm. something just now. Like my Hyosho Ranyu hit really fucking hard just now. Try to get the screenshot. Hang on. Take a second. Oh really? I was trying to farm for pilgrimage. Like pilgrimage is the only one that's left that I really want. I know I can just buy it from the market bot for like 8,000k, but that's not the point. The point is I want that shit on my own hard work, right? And mudra kasatsu, kasatsu, kasatsu. That's nothing. Oh, it's so hard to find now. I should have like taken a screenshot when it happened just now. Need to find. Need to find. Suiton, Suiton, Mudra. Where is it? Where's that? After Kasatsu, Kasatsu, Kasatsu. But of course, obviously, it's because like I have like buff from everyone else as well. So probably that's why my Hyosho Ranyu was so fucking good. But yeah, anyway, I'm too lazy to find it now. I'll try to find it later. You haven't been due to internship? Oh yeah. Hello, good morning, Yujun. Good morning. Man, I've no clue why like my how many of you are in my stream right now? Like there's like at least 3 of you, but my viewership is just fucking 1 viewer. That makes me very sad. But nah, just kidding. Anyway, yeah, cute rabbit, unlucky rabbit. It's fucking stupid, I'm telling you. Twitch is weird as fuck. But yeah, you're seeing 5 viewers? I'm seeing 1 viewer. Damn, son. I fucking hate Twitch, man. Yeah, I know. It's like breaking up my self-esteem as if it's not broken enough already. You know? My breaking my non-existent self-esteem. But anyway, Deanne's not here because Deanne's got somewhere to go to and attend to and do, I think. Trust in my chat? Hell yeah, I do trust in my chat. Anyway, it's almost time for me to start, but let me just explain it again to those who are new here. I Okay, if you guys follow me on my Twitch, you can just check on my schedule, but I'll just repeat it anyway. On every Monday, I stream Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I stream Noodible. I changed the Friday Noodibles because Friday morning I go to pottery class now. I sign up for pottery class. I'm trying to be a potter now. So so Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday I do Noodibles. On Tuesday evening, if possible, I will do stream for reclears, but I didn't do reclears stream this week because I was too lazy, and I recleared by Party Finder yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday. So I did the reclaim yesterday, and then on Friday evening at 7:30. Sorry, before that, Noodibles 11 a.m. GMT plus 8 every single Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. On Friday 7:30, also 7 o'clock GMT plus 8. I play Borderlands with Strudel, Sam Caroli, and a new Twitch friend that I made. Actually, it's not my Twitch friend, it's Strudel's Twitch friend, but we hang out fine. So I do have a very extensive weekly schedule, and then I don't really stream on weekend. I know most people like to watch things on weekends, but I also noticed that a lot of people like to do things on weekends, so they're not free enough to hang out with me and listen to me read or stuff like that. So I prefer to do Noodibles on weekdays so that people can listen to it while they are working or studying. Hopefully, it won't distract them too much. Just put me on the background. Follow me. Put me on the background. Listen to me trying to pronounce words. English is my second language, by the way. Um, Actually, it's my third. It's not even my second, to be honest. Yeah. Now that I think about it, it's actually my third language. But anyway, it is now 11 plus, past 11. I am going to take a sip of my tea and we shall start reading The Guest Cat by Takashi Hiraide. Yes, I know, I did take a sip. While there's absolutely nobody here, I'm just gonna put my camera on myself, I guess. Pathetic. Anyway, today we are reading The Gas Cat by Takashi Hiraide, Chapter 1. At first, it looked like low-lying ribbons of clouds just floating there, but then the clouds would be blown a little bit to the left and next to the left. Oh my god, my brain just fucking. Hang on. I had like a brain jam and I just mixed. Am I dyslexic? I just mixed up right and left in the first fucking paragraph. Hang on. We shall start again. Chapter 1 of The Gas Cat. Okay. At first, it looked like low-lying ribbons of clouds just floating there. But then the clouds would be blown a little bit to the right, then next to the left. The small window in the corner of our kitchen bordered on a tall wooden fence, so close a person could barely pass by. From inside the house, its frosted glass looked like a dim movie screen. Then there was a small knothole in the wooden fence and the green of the bamboo hedge, which was about 10 feet wide. To the north of the alley was always projected on the crude screen. Whenever someone walked by in the narrow alleyway, a figure formed, filling the entire window. Viewed from the dark interior of the house, sunny day seems ever more vivid, and working perhaps on the same principle as a camera obscura, the figures of people walking past were turned upside down. Not only that, but whatever images passed by came from the opposite direction than the one in which the people were actually walking. And as the passerby approached closer to the knothole, their overturned figures would swell so large that they would entirely fill the window frame, and then, once they had passed, would suddenly disappear like some special optical phenomenon. But on that day, the image of the ribbon clouds did not attempt to move past. The image did not grow very large when it neared the knothole. Even when it should have expanded to an enlarged size, the image floating in the upper part of the window was only big enough to sit on the palm of one's hand. The ribbon clouds hesitated as if hovering on the street, and then the sound of a feeble cry arose. My wife and I decided a name for the little alleyway. We call it a lightning alley. It was about 20 minutes from the teeming Shinjuku terminal on a private line heading southwest. You got off at a little station where the express didn't stop and walked south for about 10 minutes. There, you hit a bit of an incline. Then, at the top of the hill, you cross the only strip with any significant traffic going east and west. Once you crossed that diagonally, the rest of the way was downhill. And after about 100 yards down a wide rambling incline, there was a house on the left with an old-fashioned fence, its bamboo slats attached vertically all along the bottom half of the plastered wall. Just before reaching its gate, you turn into the austere little alleyway on the left, while the road continued along the wooden fence. Located within this same wall, plastered walls, and wooden fence, on the extensive ground of an old estate, the place we were renting had originally been a guest house. A little more than halfway down the alley, a rickety gate of the wooden fence doubled as the landlady's side entrance and the tenant's front gate. Like an eye that went unnoticed, the knothole was located beyond that gate. Passing by behind the fence without without knowing just how plainly your image was projected on our window, you would first run head on into the brick wall of the house jutting out from the left, then you would turn to the right at an acute angle, and just as suddenly you would run into a house whose roof was concealed behind a dense growth of a huge Zelkova tree, at which point the path turned sharply again to the left. The frequent sharp turns created the lightning bolt pattern one often sees in drawings, so we jokingly referred it as the lightning alley. The Zelkova tree shading the alley was of an advanced age. Quite likely the local district had designated it as a protected tree. When the house had been built, it had been designed to provide an enclosure for the trunk of the tree. Its branches, which had been allowed to grow and spread unhindered, extended their luxuriant fingers from the east side of the landlady's garden to over the northeastern corner where the tenant's cottage stood, providing all the blessing of its leafy protection. By late autumn, the yard would grow thick with fallen leaves, causing the landlady to heave many deep sighs. It was a boy of around 5 from the house next door, also embraced by the great Zelkova tree, who became determined to capture and keep the stray cat several days after it had first crept into the lightning alley. Though they were our neighbors to the east, the twists and turns of Lightning Alley produced a distance between us. Despite our daily comings and goings, there was never an opportunity for us to meet face to face. The sight of the neighbor's house bordering our garden was a solid wall with just one small window for ventilation. And to be blunt, we were simply renters of the guest house, tucked back in a small corner of the extensive ground of the estate, so there was little sense of our actually being true neighbors. The boy often played where the alleyways turned sharply, shouting energetically in a high-pitched voice, but since our daily lives took place in such completely different time zones, mine spent facing a desk till late in the night, we rarely crossed paths. Even so, a voice, recognizably his travelled over the fence, reaching me late one morning at the breakfast table and firmly announcing the intention to keep the cat. A few days later, I noticed the cat scurrying around our garden, no more than the size required for hanging clothes out to dry. Then I heard the boy's voice and found myself breaking into a smile. Looking back now, I see this was a missed opportunity. I knew someone would be here. Good morning, Elisa Shabais. Oh my god. Let me take some time. That was the end of the first chapter, by the way. So let me greet my friends. I mean, thank you for attending Noodibles today. keep the cat. You know how I kept my cat? It's because my neighbor brought it home and then didn't take care of it, so I took it from him without asking him. That's how I kept my cat. I basically stole my cat. But thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys. Once again, thank you so much. On to chapter 2. The little boy's triumphant proclamation must have been heard by the landlady inside the big house, for that evening we heard her talking in front of the neighbor's gate. How would you like to have a cat? The woman's dry voice was pressing. It's just really too much for us, the voice went on, chatting blithely about how cats infiltrated the premises from every corner, laying waste to the garden, raising a racket on the roof, sometimes even leaving muddy paws inside the house. The young housewife next door spoke in a voice both quiet and refined. One would think she would have placed on the defensive, but after patiently listening to the 80-year-old pleas, it appeared she had no trouble holding on her own. In all likelihood, she could see the boy standing behind his grandmother and assume he was praying for dear life. And in the end, it seemed it was the old woman who lost out. I remember that was just 2 years earlier when we signed the lease to rent the guest house from the old woman. There was a clause appended to the agreement stating that no children or pets were allowed. Neither of us especially wanted a child at that point of our life, even though we were on the verge of passing beyond our mid 30s. And when it came to what are referred as pets, neither of us especially liked cats, and the notion of owning a dog had never even come up. So you could say that, based on the old woman's term of occupancy, we were extremely well suited renters. There were there are there are a few cat lovers among my close friends, and I have to admit that there have been moments when that look of excessive sweet affection oozing from around their eyes has left me feeling absolutely disgusted. Having devoted themselves to cats body and soul, they seem at times utterly indifferent to shame. When I think about it now, rather than my not being a cat lover, it may simply have been that I felt a disconnect with people who were cat lovers. But more than anything, I had simply never experienced having one around. I had a dog once when I was a child. I felt my relationship with the dog was simple and frank. The tension felt through the leash between the one who obeys and the one who leads was refreshing. I must have been right around the same age as the little neighbor boy when I was living with my family in the row house which acted as a residence for municipal workers, though the row houses now more look more like tenements in a slum than public buildings. I had only just recently gotten the dog when somebody up and stole it. Most likely it was mid afternoon on a Saturday or Sunday when my father noticed that the Spitz, which had been tied outside in front of the entry, was gone. Dog nappers, he grumbled. Then immediately began trying to counteract the event. He stormed out of the house, taking me along, and we raced around in every direction in search of the Spitz. But there was no sign of either dog or dog napper. I remember feeling clearly that I shouldn't ask my father anything more about what happened, seeing how he had reacted when the dog went missing. My older sister insists I cried all night long, but I had no memory of that. Although I myself did not especially like cats, my wife had an innate connection with all living things. From the moment From the time she was small, she would go out with her older brother to catch crawdads and salamanders and keep them in an aquarium. She says she even hatched butterflies of all kinds. They would fly around her room. She would keep various kinds of birds, finches and canaries, and also raise chicks. She cared for baby birds that had fallen out of nests as well, and even nursed wounded bats back to health. Even now, when she turned on the TV to a nature program, could correctly name all the animals, even rare species in faraway countries. In my wife's case, what I mean by not liking cats is something of an entirely different order than her husband's attitude. Since all her life she had engaged with a variety of animals with the same level of interest. So, in other words, she did not have my sort of preference of dogs over cats. Once, oop, there you go. Hello. Hey Agnes, thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much. Once the cat had become the next door neighbor's pet, he it would often appear in the garden in a new vermilion collar, hung with a tinkling bell. A simple wooden fence separated the yard of the main house and the little garden adjacent to the guest house, the two having originally been one. With the landscapes of trees and little hills, ponds and flower beds, the imposing garden of the main house was most agreeable to the cat. After first stepping into the guest house small garden, the cat would set out on its own for the expanse of the big house yard. Whenever the door to our small garden was left open, the cat was in its habit of peeking inside our house. On its way to and from the main yard, the cat wasn't a bit scared of humans, but it was cautious, just a natural part of its behavior perhaps, and would gaze at us quietly with its tail standing straight up in the air, yet it would never come inside. If we tried to pick it up outside, it would quickly run away, and if we tried to force it to let us hold it, it would bite. Aware of the ever vigilant eye of the landlady, we made no real attempts to tame the cat. These events unfolded between the autumn of 1988 and the beginning of winter, during the final months of the Showa period. I can see a new guest. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much. Miku Katniss. Oh my god. What a name. And from the cat of Thank you so much. Thank you for attending Noodibles. We are reading. You can listen to it at TV. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, we shall continue to chapter 3. This one, the chapters are actually quite short. It's very short and sweet. That's why I like this book. The cat's name was Chibi, which means little one. So original, right? We could hear the boy's particularly high pitched voice calling the cat Chibi. Then we would hear the sound of the boy's shoes running around outside, followed by the tinkling of the little bell announcing the cat's arrival. Chibi was a jewel of a cat. Her pure white fur was mottled with several lamp-black blotches containing just a bit of light brown. The sort of cat you might see just about anywhere in Japan, except she was especially slim and tiny. These were her individual characteristics: slim and small, with ears that stood out, taping off beautifully at the tips, often twitching. She would approach silently and undetected to rub up against one's legs. At first I thought Chibi avoided me because I was not used to cats, but this seems not to have been the case. When a girl who often passed along Lightning Alley stopped and crouched to gaze at the cat, it did not run away. But as soon as she attempted to touch it, the cat quickly slipped off, avoiding contact at all costs. The cat's manner of rejection was like cold, white light. Moreover, the cat rarely made a sound. As far as I remember, when it first appeared in the alley, it made some sort of sound. But since then, it had never let off a meow. It looked as if no matter how much time passed, the cat was not going to ever let us hear its voice. This seems to be the message the cat was giving us. Another one of Chibi's characteristics was that she changed the direction of her cautious attention frequently. This active behavior wasn't limited to her kittenhood. Perhaps because she played alone most of the time in the expansive garden, she reacted strongly to insects and reptiles. And there were times when I could only conclude that she must be reacting to subtle changes in the wind and light, not detectable by humans. It may be that most cats share the same quickness, but even so, in Chibi's case, it was acute. She was, after all, the cat of Lightning Alley. My wife got into the habit of pointing to the cat whenever it went by, extolling its virtues. Trained by the boy next door, Chibi had become quite skilled at playing with a ball. It seemed that the boy was using a rubber ball that fit right on the palm of one's hand. Sounds of laughter and play in the alley and the regular bouncing of the ball elicited such pleasant feelings that I gradually began to feel like trying it out for myself here in our little garden. Finally, one day, after a period of self reflection, I took an old ping pong ball, which had been shut away in the corner of the drawer, in my hand and headed for the garden. I tried bouncing the ping pong ball at the concrete below the open veranda. Chibi crouched, her eyes locked on the ball's movement. Then she lowered her entire body, become tense, with all four legs aligned as she gently lowered her haunches, contracting them so that they became so slightly rounded like a cock spring. From that position, she leapt off to the earth with a violent force, boldly pouncing on the small white ball. Then she batted the ball back and forth several times mid-air between her two front paws, and next shot quickly through my legs and ran off. Chibi's independence would manifest itself in unexpected ways, even while performing acts of incredible athletic skills. Casting aside the ping pong ball, she turned about and at an acute angle, yet in the next moment she had placed her tiny paw on the head of a toad concealed in the shade of one landscape rock. Good morning, Bit! Thank you for attending Noodibles. Then, just as suddenly as she flew to the other side of the garden, extending one of her front legs to slip into a clump of bushes. Next, showing her white belly, she looked into my direction, twitching slightly. There was no stopping. Sorry. But there was no stopping there. Without a glance at her human playmate, she leaped up and grabbed the sleeve of an undershirt, swinging gently back and forth on the clothesline. Then, flashing through the wooden gate, she quickly retreated to the yard of the big house. I had heard from one of my cat lover friends that playing with a ball was something that cats only did when they are still kitten, but it seemed that Chibi, reaching adulthood, only picked up the momentum. Which brings us to yet another quality of Chibi's. In the words of our landlady, she was a real looker. As the opinion of someone who had with a long history of chasing away stray cats, I figured she knew what she was talking about. There's a photographer who says cat lovers always believed their own cats is better looking than anyone else's. According to her, they have all got blinders on. She also said that though she too is a major cat lover, having noticed this fact means she is now hated by all other cat lovers. So these days only takes pictures of scruffy looking strays. Chibi, who loved to play ball, gradually began to visit us on her own and would try to get us to play with her. She would step gingerly into the room and gaze intently at its occupants, then purposefully turn around and walk back out as if to lead us to the garden. This process would be repeated until she got a response. Most of the time, my wife would put down whatever she was doing, slip happily into her sandals, and head outside. Having played to her heart's content, Chibi would come inside and rest for a while. When she began to sleep on the sofa, like a talisman curled gently in the shape of a comma and dug up from the prehistoric archaeological site, a deep sense of happiness arrived, as if the house itself had dreamed this scene. Avoiding the prying eyes of the landlady, we began leaving it up to Chibi to come inside the house whenever she wanted. And with this new development, I had begun, little by little, to understand cat lovers. Whether on TV or in all of the ubiquitous cat calendars, it seemed as if there was no cat comparable to her. But though I had started to think of her as the best cat around, she was not really our cat. First, we would hear the tinkling of the bell. Then she would appear, so we began to call her by the nickname Tinkerbell. Whenever we wanted her to come over, this name seemed to find itself on our lips. I wonder where Tinkerbell is. By the time my wife had gotten the words out of her mouth, we'd hear the tinkling of Chibi's bell. We realized that when she was near to the point where exiting the foyer next door, located to the second corner of the lightning alley, Chibi would leap through the tear in the wire mesh boundary of the property, dash along the side of the building, turn at the far end of the veranda, leap up on the open area of the deck, then placing her front paws on the window frame at about the height of a human adult's knee, stretching out her neck to peek inside. In winter she came inside. Little by little, through the crack in the partially open window, her tendency to visit subtly developed. Her appearances were repeated until, as if a silken opening in the fabric that had been continuously moistened and stretched, Chibi had entered our lives. But, at the same time, call it fate if you will, something else was closing in and pressing itself against that tendency. Aw, thank you, Bit. Thank you. This is casual, Nuna. I'm gonna take a sip of tea and then we'll continue chapter 4.
Stretch.
That's a stretch. That felt good, by the way. Thank you for the redemption of a stretch. Okay. Guys, please let me know if I'm reading too fast or too slow. I do enjoy the feedback from you guys. So please let me know if I'm reading too fast for you all. Hello, viewers. If this is the first time you are here at Noodibles, Noodibles is a play on word on Audible whereby I read books to viewers, listeners, whatever you consider yourself to be. Um, and give me just one moment, please. I need to refresh my party finder. I know. Okay. Alrighty. Alright. That's good. Alright, let's us continue. Chapter 4. Oh, by the way, to new viewers, as the title says in my stream, we are reading Takashi Hiraide's The Guest Cat, one of the most popular Japanese books out there translated. Chapter 4. It is not out of preference that I use the word fate, or should I say fortuna, but as the young cat's visit became more frequent, I came to feel that there were some things that only this word could express. The old mansion was built in the 1920s by a military man from Kyoto, and it is said that he brought in the gardeners from the old city to work on the landscaping. The property was nearly 5,000 square feet on its entirety, and its long side stretching out from east to west. The garden was irrigated by a supply of water brought in on the south side, and with a variety of trees arranged about the grounds, boasted a design that made use of subtle changes in scenery as different flowers came into bloom with each season. A pond, which received water cascading over a waterfall, was located in the center of the garden with a little to the east, and there were two planters for water lilies embracing more than one variety of the aquatic water embedded in the earth a short distance from the pond and near the veranda. In addition, there was a smaller cobalt blue Chinese porcelain planter farther away from the veranda at the edge of the pond, filled with the same black water and more water lilies. I had heard that I heard that the landlady and her husband bought the house in the late 1950s. Their four children had at one time each flown from the nest, and since then the elderly couple had lived there, just the two of them, and the care of the trees and plants fell to the hands of the old man. It was the summer of 1986 when we first visited the guest house, taken there by a realtor located right across from the train station. We have been forced to give up our previous rental quite suddenly, almost as if some kind of natural disaster had struck, and we were so completely exhausted that we had lost the will to search for a new home. So we asked an acquaintance to perform a divination, and we were told to follow the direction of fire, Yang, the third calendar sign, which opens to 15 degrees. Concentrating on this fairly narrow fan shaped area with little effort, even unceremoniously, what we encountered was this place. Passing through the shopping district with its old air and having gone up a slight incline, the area then descending towards the south was all residential. There was little traffic down the rambling slope through the road was wide. Though the road was wide, a large variety of plantings stood out against the background of the houses, and a calm atmosphere lingered there. The first time we entered this silence, a strange feeling of peace came upon me, as if a loving hand had placed itself gently upon my chest. It struck me that there seemed to be quite a large number of elderly people in the neighborhood. Soon, to our left, the old house with the bamboo slats covering the bottom half of the plastered wall was pointed out to us, and then ushered in the under gate, with its roof partially hidden by the pine branches. My wife and I entered the little alleyway. In his discussion of fate, it seems Machiavelli thought that fortuna dominates at least half of our lives, while in the remaining half of a little less, human strength and competence, virtue, attempts to counteract it. He imagined fate as a goddess, capricious and fickle, or as a river which could flood at any moment. Machiavelli, active in the politics of Florentine Republic and known to succeeding generations of his political writings as the ultimate realist, was also a poet of rich and varied rhetorical flourishes. He left behind numerous poems, plays, and allegories. In his writings, Fortuna and the word virtue, translated variously as competence, virtue, ability, skill, valor, grit or backbone, and vigor, impulse or momentum. Only sampling of the more than 20 possible renderings appear, and when in addition to this, the necessary, the essential, perhaps even desperate word necessita appears. A unique feeling of exaltation is communicated. Virtue de necessita. In other words, Machiavelli suggests that only the skill displayed in times of emergency can successfully compete with fate. It is said that when comparing fate to a river, Machiavelli meant the Arno, which often brought floods to Florence. In his position as secretary of the government of Florence, he worked with Leonardo da Vinci, sorry, which who has been hired as a military architect and attempted to realize a grandiose plan to change the natural course of the river. But the plan, initiated 500 years ago, was plagued by misfortune, disasters both natural and man-made. It was a major failure. In reading Machiavelli's literary works, of the many metaphors used to express fate, especially meaningful is the river which could flood at any time, an image used in chapter 24 of The Prince. Perhaps because of having directly experienced such a major failure himself, he knew its sheer agony. So let us liken fate to a destructive river here as well. The river rages, flooding the plain, consuming trees and buildings before it, washing away the earth and carrying it away to the other side as it surges forward. People fleeing, but ultimately they succumb to water's momentum. Nothing, no one escapes. Living beings in turning a corner or in producing the movement required to enter the crack in a certain partially open door are endowed with certain properties, something which produces its own little river. These daily movements are repeated, and certain tendency, a certain current, if you will, is generated. Then, this minor current, because it is a current, must at some point flow into a larger river. Not only in his political writings, but also in his poetry, plays, and allegories, cannot Machiavelli perhaps be read as having, at bottom, this flow as the basis of his thinking? Chapter 5. The kitchen dining area was snug up against the sharp corner of Lightning Alley. From the window facing west above the sink, the big house-owner's kitchen window was visible, while on the opposite side of the cottage towards the east, our bay window in the dining room often revealed the heads of people turning the corner of the alley, visible just beyond the steel wires stretched across the top of the wooden fence. Moving in southerly direction through our guest house, you first pass through the greeting area, a small space, only 2 tatami mats in size, which look towards the main entry of the right, with its lattice door of frosted glass, and opposite that, the sliding door of the closet on its left. Once past this room, you arrive at a large Japanese-style room of size of 6 tatami mats. Entering, you first notice the traditional tokonoma in to the immediate right, while a closet took up the rest of the side of the wall. On the east side was a glass door designed to look like a traditional latticework paper door, through which you could see the backs of people beyond the fence who had just walked past the second lightning-shaped corner and were continuing their walk down the alley. Beyond the 6 mat room was another room not quite as large, this one with a hardwood floor facing a little courtyard for drying clothes. The wooden fence continued beyond the miniature garden, turned and came around, moss covered, doing wonders to block the view from the landlady's impressive garden of going ons at our place. The cottage design provided many windows. On the west of the room, with the hardwood floor, a round window with a vine-covered bamboo lattice was cut into the wall, leading one to believe it was originally a tea room. Or it may have also been a moon viewing room as well. I have been told that the view of the garden, with its artificial hills, that had been best from here, but now it was obstructed by the addition of a bath, and the furniture of its residence had nearly destroyed the elegant design. So many windows still had a relaxing effect on the weary. On the south side, running the full length of the room, there was a large window from knee high up to the ceiling, which was nearly 12 feet wide and provided a sweeping view of the horizon. And yet, since the owner's garden wall ran on beyond the house, and as there were no real windows, so to speak, off in the wall of the large neighboring residence to the east, and because of the natural features of the land itself with its downward southerly slope, no eyes fell on the interior. Partway out the eaves, the outermost half of the glass hung over the garden, become an oblique skylight inviting in all the sunlight one wanted. One day in early spring 1987, 6 months after having moved into the new place, I opened wide the window with its aluminum sash, and the wind came in from the south like an avalanche of snow. Then, one after another, I opened all the other windows in the house. The window over the kitchen sink, of course, and the glass lattice windows in the two bedrooms of the east side, followed by the bay window in the dining room and then the bathroom. The house quickly became a hollow cavity for the wind to race through. I stared in blank amazement at the courtyard, for drying clothes where the clouds in the sky ran quickly past. Two slender branches of mistletoe, which had been entwined there, snapped in the wind and fell. I looked up to see the neighbor's great Zelkova tree gradually encroaching on the side of the fence, blasted by the wind, causing both branches and trunk to sway violently. Through the slanted skylight, a few rays of sunlight would pierce just for a moment and then vanish, only to return, combined with buds blown in from the plum tree, everything timed to the rhythm of illumination and concealment. The small desk had been toppled in the wind, scattering the various papers which had been placed there all about the room. Now, like beings with a will of their own, they rose up as if attempting to return to the place where they had fallen. Once the arrangement of objects had settled down, I felt that I was finally ready to establish myself in this place. This is where I will live, I thought to myself. Perhaps it was because I had now developed a feeling of the passing of the seasons in our new abode, as if each new house, each new neighborhood contained its own unique experience of the passage of time. To the south side of the room, with the hardwood floor, there was what they call a tea room parlance, a hanging ceiling. This was where the slanting eaves of the roof outside ran into the interior, so that the ceiling on one side of the room shared the same slope. And this sloping ceiling of frosted glass with slits like bamboo screen doubled the effect of the skylight. I would lie here with a woven mat, using my arm as a pillow, and await the changing of light. Spring rain began to fall. I found that I could observe the changing in the size of the raindrops, as if they had been placed on a slide for viewing microscopic specimens. If I closely watched the initial splatter of rain, I would also gaze blankly at the movement of clouds and the dancing of the great trees' leaves surrounding the house. The shadow of burnt rust passing by was the elongated belly of one of the thieving cats which would come and go from the property. A bird would alight on the eaves and press its pink feet against the glass roof, and just as soon begin to slide down its slippery surface. Taken by surprise, the bird would often quickly flee, making it one of the wooden cross pieces of few wing beats. The translucent surface of the eaves caused unending confusion for the birds. Time passed by as I slowly built the courage to resign from the publishing job I had kept for the last few years. Often related Often work related situations would find me out of town where there there was non-stop drinking, and then on the weekends I would while away the hours playing baseball. I began to feel that I was throwing away the time I needed to work on my own writing. The day seemed to rush faster and faster, and my work as an editor, supporting the writing efforts of others, began to make less and less sense. One day, I found I had developed a large blister on my right upper arm, apparently caused by too much baseball. A few days later, the blister appeared on my right shoulder and then all the way up to the right side of my neck. Then complications occurred. For a while, my thought process became sluggish. Speaking became difficult. Perhaps because the nerves on the right side of the neck are related to the speech center in the left side of the brain. As it turns out, I had shingles. One side of my body, the virus had spread all along the nervous system. I underwent treatment for a month, but the nature of the disease is such that one never knows when one's condition might again be thrown out of order. And in the end, this is what finally encouraged me to make up my mind to quit my job. And yet, all the same, I was unable to build enough courage to act on this plan. After all, there was no way I could make a living just on the projects I had accumulated up to that point. So I went from day to day in the atmosphere of gloom. But at the same time, something about having settled into our new place brought at the expected challenges of the next year starkly before my eyes. I approached my wife, who was in the kitchen. Let's go to a cafe. Why do I have the feeling I don't really want to hear this? She drew back, somehow knowing what it was I had to say. At a little cafe in the old shopping district near the station, I laid a chart out on the table which I had drawn up showing the writing projects I had in process at the time, with per page payments and royalties I could expect from each and dates when payments could be expected. At the time, my wife had a contract with a publishing company as a proofreader. Her job was to check the revised versions of galleys, first reading through the text without checking against the manuscript, then fact checking and verifying references. She would also point out errors in translated text, ensure proper usage of kanji characters, and in some cases improve on sentence constructions. So I had her annual income added into the chart, and with all the data spread out before us, preached the virtues of having both of us work from home. In any case, it looked as if we could handle our expenses for at least a year and a half. I myself know I myself knew that beyond that there was no guarantee, but in my role as seducer, I realized that the absolute self-confidence was de rigueur. So I pushed ahead with my soliloquy, drawing a picture of our new life together, frugal yet with the beauty of simplicity. She was still a bit nervous about the whole thing, but my wife, seeing the sheer effort I had to make to get to this point, how painfully slow and careful my decision had been, couldn't bring herself to demolish the plan I had drawn up. We went home and ate dinner, and then returned to our desks, placed side by side near the window on the south side of the house, taking up our own meager work. Before we knew it, it was middle of the night. For no particular reason, my wife looked up and let out a muffled gasp of surprise. The full moon shone through the glass eave above us with its slits like a bamboo screen, so that its image was drawn out, flowing there like a milky white river. A sip of water, and then we start chapter 6. Chapter 6. It's best to go empty handed. This was the advice of friends, all of them writers with whom I had worked over the years. Oddly enough, it was the fact of having supported first rate work that eventually led me to give up my job. I had always dealt with my writers with an honest respect, which came directly from me rather than from the demands of etiquette. They were almost like family in a way, distant yet close, all of a type, and several who came to me I looked after till their last breath. I, myself, had by this time passed my mid 30s and was about to enter the territory called middle age, and here I was, filling the forms to officially leave my job. I resigned from the publishing company in the summer of 1987. Now, I was unattached, but in January of the following year, I received news that an old friend with whom I had been close but haven't seen in quite some time was now apparently on the verge of death. Though a bit older than me, Y was a drinking buddy and one of my baseball friends. Most of all, he was a poet of my generation, and I had great respect for his many talents. He had eventually married and two children were born. Next came a house at the northern suburb, and when invited to play ball he would come up with some kind of excuse, his voice trailing off almost painfully, so I stopped calling, and gradually we grew apart. Over the course of time, always keeping a busy schedule as a production editor in the city, catching the last train home, he developed colon cancer and in the spring of 1986 underwent hours of surgery. He was told, and his friends were notified that it was an intestinal obstruction. Hailing from the snow country in the far north, he was hardworking and loyal. Soon after leaving the hospital, he was back at work, returning to his usual habits, though on his commute he had begun using the handrail when taking the stairs at the station where he would change trains. His poems were now rarely seen in the magazine. The noble-minded do not thrust others aside in order to make their ways in the world, but they themselves are ultimately thrust aside by the advancing tide. When I rushed to the hospital to find why, in his sick bed, he turned his face, swollen like a catcher's mitt due to the poisons in his system caused by a kidney failure, and like a splendid beast maintaining its silent pride, managed a broken smile. In the hallway, the doctor informed me that he had only 2 weeks left. It's killing him, I thought. And it's killing you too. Never forget that. What was it? I felt I could see what it was quite clearly now. But then, something unexpected happened. The cancer cells, which had multiplied in the kidneys, underwent necrosis and were then discharged from his body along with the urine. Miraculously, Y recovered temporarily, and then, perhaps because of strong painkillers, we were able to talk again like we used to when we were out drinking together, ostentatiously with bravado, and he was able to joke with the visitors who came to see him. For someone like myself who no longer worked a 9 to 5 job, it was perfect. So for 4 months, I visited dutifully, commuting to the suburb hospital as if I was dropping by one of the old watering holes we used to haunt. During this time, Y organized and arranged his complete works for collected poems which groups of friends had gotten together to produce. After the galleys were in hand, he even managed to write 4 new poems. Then, having dragged himself that far, he passed away in late May of 1988. Looking back on it, I would say one's 30s are a cruel age. At this point, I think of them as a time I while away unaware of the tide that can suddenly pull you out beyond the shallows into the sea of hardships and even death. It was during that dark time, when I learned of Y's dangerous condition, that I discovered the strange optical phenomenon in our house. One day, early in the afternoon, I heard a voice calling from our kitchen. My wife, who had left her desk, nowhere to be found. There was only a voice coming from somewhere around the first corner of the lightning alley. Watch me from the little window in the kitchen! In the darkness, behind the door of the toilet located in the corner of the kitchen, there was a space not quite 3 feet square with a window hung like a projection screen, the only window in the house facing north, closed against the early spring chill. In the center of the polished glass there was a perpendicular line of dimly floating green, which I became aware of now for the first time. Perhaps a corner of the hardwood floor was reflected there. At just that moment, the sound of footsteps slowly approached from the right, advancing purposefully, and my wife, in the form of an inverted image in vivid color, appeared from the left, stretched out of proportion. As soon as the image appeared, it disappeared to the right, passing in the opposite direction of the sound of the footstep. Quickly, I pulled open the window. There was a knothole in the wooden fence no larger than a coin. Placing my eye close to peek through, I could see the house on the other side of the lightning alley, the high garden hedge. But the image in the hole was turned upside down. I asked my wife to walk back and forth a few times outside the window, and we had some fun repeating our little experiment with this simple yet vivid illusion. Next, I called my wife inside and I took her place in the street, walking back and forth so that she could see the visual effects. Then, both of us sat on the raised platform on the two matte white greeting area just inside the entry, eagerly awaiting the arrival of passerbys, though this was a rare event on Lightning Alley, like a camera obscura which transmitted only that which was needed. The house, with its breezy interior, had a soothing effect on the soul. Nothing much about cats, huh? You guys picked the right book, huh? Don't trust the book by its cover, guys. Chapter 7. A sip of tea. Usual. Chapter 7. I often remember the appearance of Chibi the cat. There you go. And the scene in the guest house when she first came inside. It was in the late autumn of 1988. The emperor's condition had deteriorated rapidly after he had vomited blood in the mid-September, and now everyone in Japan seemed to be in the mood for voluntary restraint. There was a narrow space with an earthen floor for the washing machine facing the courtyard, which was a mere token of a garden partition off the spacious garden of the big house. One shining sunny afternoon, slipping through the crack of the open door, four bright white feet stepped softly into the room insulated drain board, and with a with a well-honed curiosity rushing through her entire body, Chibi quietly surveyed its meager interior. The old landlady was constantly driving off the calico cat owned by neighbors to the south. There was also a black bicolored cat, more of a combination of India ink and a muddy color than burnt rust, an old alley cat who managed to infiltrate the property. We heard this cat would sneak into houses when people were gone if a sliding door was left open even a crack. My wife affectionately called her Mrs. Muddy. Our lease stated clearly that no children or pets were allowed. But then, one One day, the landlady told my wife that she was sorry that she wouldn't eat that way. Apparently, the old couple had simply wanted some peace and quiet. But the quiet life changed when the old man became older and weaker and lay bedridden in the Western style bedroom on the west side of the house. And then the landlady took on the burden of all the sundry chores of the entire estate until it was more than she could handle. Now, she seemed to be attempting to take control of stray cats as well and rid the premises of them. Cats being cats, they could be found everywhere in the spacious garden, perched on the fence railing at some particular height, and she devoted herself to arbitrary researches and capricious measures ranging from the whimsical to the mad. Once Chibi had learned how she could get into the little house, she would sleep quietly inside as long as we left the door open a crack. She would never cause any mischief. She would simply stroll through the house in a leisurely fashion. Often she hid her soft body with its pattern of lamp-black spots floating on its pure white coat of fur. Between the various objects in the bed in the room, she never made a sound, nor would she allow us to hold her. If you tried to hold her, she would let out a barely audible mew, bite your hand softly, and then slip out of your arms. My wife was quickly my wife was quick to reprimand such advances. Laughing at her husband with his bitten hand, she declared she would never hold Chibi. She's a free spirit, she can do whatever she wants. So Chibi remained unfettered, coming and going as she pleased. Soon she began to sleep wherever she wished, in whatever position she liked. From the end of the year 1988 till the beginning of the next, I struggled to complete the work of writing 2 books commissioned by the publisher. Other than one ring of the bell on New Year's Eve at the old Buddhist temple nearby, and a brief pilgrimage to Shinto shrine located in the opposite.
Have you ever had a dream that you could don't you want don't
Not the right time for that, bro. Not the right time for that. That's for the end. That's for the end. That's my exit, bro. And where was I? Fuck my life. I should take that shit out. God damn it. Nobody should be allowed to use that except me. Anyway. Other than, other, Other than one ring of the bell on New Year's Eve at the old Buddhist temple nearby and a brief pilgrimage to the Shinto shrine located in the opposite direction. Thank you for the one. Thank you. I could, but it's also fun when Twisty does it for me because Twisty knows exactly what time to redeem it. Okay. Other than one ring of the bell on a New Year's Eve at the old Buddhist temple nearby, and a brief pilgrimage to the Shinto shrine located in the opposite direction, followed by a visit to an all-night noodle shop, I took part in none of the usual year-end or New Year's festivities, but remained at my desk, hard at work. The urgent work kept the atmosphere in the house tense till nearly dawn, but just when I had reached the point of exhaustion and was beginning to feel desperate, invariably a small dim white shadow leapt onto the open veranda and resting its front feet on the window frame, peered in through the large window on the east side of the bed of the room which the desk faced. I opened the window and welcomed in the guests. Accompanied by the winter sunrise, the mood inside the house was restored. Chibi was our New Year's visitor. Chibi was our first New Year's visitor. They call the visitors who go around to all the houses on the New Year's Day to wish everyone a happy New Year pilgrims. Curiously enough, though she didn't offer a prayer, when this pilgrim came through the window, she did seem to be familiar with at least one formal greeting, where the hands, or in this case the paws, are placed together on the floor to kneel before one's host. So, this is how the new year began. On the 7th of January, news raced through the Japan archipelago that the emperor had finally succumbed. Somehow, by that time, I managed to write two books. Both of them were about baseballs. Chapter 8. We made a door to the room that only Chibi could get through, not any other cats. Below the large window on the south wall, there was a floor level window of frosted glass about 16 inches tall, running the full length of one above it for sweeping out dust. By opening this window just 3 inches, a gap was left which allowed only Chibi to squeeze through. In order to prevent cold air and insects from getting in, we hung a thick cotton curtain of royal blue over it. On the wooden floorboards in the corner of the Japanese style room, we placed a cardboard box which had originally contained mandarin oranges to act as Chibi's own special room. We put a towel in the box and a dish for her food. Then we set a bowl for milk beside the box. If Chibi managed if Chibi happened to come in when the box had been moved to the other room for cleaning, she would immediately notice that it was missing, then fall into a heap on the floor in confusion. Her vermilion color would occasionally be replaced by a lavender one. We never knew which color she would appear in any particular day, but Chibi seems to know that she had an additional home where she could be cared for, even if the people not in position to choose a new color for her. Once Chibi came over when two editors happened to be visiting. Aware of the strangers, she circled several times around my wife, who was standing, as if to lay claim to her. She let it be known that we are now her caretakers. One afternoon, after the spring equinox had passed, Chibi had been out hunting. She arrived with a sparrow between her jaws. With her hackles up, she let out a howl and aggressively stomping to make her footstep heard, trotted around and around the guest house. I had heard that when a cat brings a kill, it always brings it back to show its owners. It's almost as if the house itself was the subject for this display for Chibi as she circled it many times over, yowling the whole time. Afterwards, she went to the vegetable garden on the far eastern end of the main garden and played with the unlucky sparrow until it no longer moved. After she finished the poor sparrow's burial, my wife repeated her earlier declaration. I won't hold Chibi, she said. It's more gratifying to let animals do whatever they like. As April came around, gossamer winged butterflies covered the garden, dancing just above its surface, coloring it a blue-gray. It seemed impossible for anyone walking in the garden to avoid stepping on them. What's interesting about animals, my wife explained, is that even though a cat may be a cat, in the end, each individual has its own character. For me, Chibi is a friend with whom I share an understanding and who just happened to have taken on the form of a cat. Then she told me about a philosopher who said that observation at its core an expression of love which doesn't get caught up in sentiment. By this time, my wife's notebook had become a daily record of Chibi's activities. In June, I left my wife to look after the house and embark on a tour. I had been assigned to write an article about several cities in the US and Canada. It was during this time that a change apparently occurred in Chibi's behavior. Perhaps she had been so well trained, but for whatever reason, Chibi never jumped up onto sofas or bed. She would even carefully walk around cushions meant for sitting Japanese style on the floor of the tatami room. But then, one night, when my wife was asleep, Chibi jumped onto the covers and lay down beside her. Ever since, she was in the habit of sleeping next to her. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, I had caught a cold in the US. Oh, an author caught Corona back in 1989. I had caught a cold in the US, and as soon as I got home, headed straight to bed. Chibi happened along and, as had become her custom, jumped up on the covers and only then noticed a different person was there. She hesitated and then jumped onto the mirror stand. After admiring herself for a moment in the mirror's reflection, she hopped down and disappeared into the darkness of the closet, slipping quickly by the strip of cloth hanging over the opening. The top shelf of the closet was her favorite place to sleep. Since it had no door, we simply hung strips of cloth in front of it, so it was easy for her to come and go. Chibi was able to sleep comfortably whenever she wanted, and from then on, we got in the habit of laying out the futon early in the evening so that we too, the human residents, could sleep anytime we wanted as well. Chapter 9. June 21st, 1989 is the date my wife broke off her friendship with Chibi. My parents, who were visiting from Kyushu, brought my wife a gift, one of their local delicacies, giant mantis shrimp from Ariake Sea, known as shappa in the local dialect. Removed from their package, their size was immediately evident, at least twice as big as what it served at an average sushi shop. On their heads were two pairs of antennas, one large and one small, and they had 5 pairs of legs, the second pair of which attached to the thorax were especially large and shaped like a sickle or scythe, said to be used to capturing small shrimp and crabs. Their tails were shaped like large plates and used for digging holes in mud along the shallows of the seashore. They were the color of topaz, and several iridescent violet streaks ran down their backs. If you poured boiling water over them, the purple streaks turned to bronze. From the early summer catch, they also sported eggs, making them a highly prized delicacy. As soon as they were brought out for an evening meal, boiled and lightly seasoned, the sound of a bell could be heard. The gas cat arrived. Once she caught the sight of the shrimp, Chibi could not contain her excitement. Her behavior was completely different from when she was offered fried fish or sashimi. But as always, my wife called to her and, tearing off a piece of shrimp with her fingers, extended her hand towards Chibi's mouth. The fur on Chibi's back stood up like shark's dorsal fin. Her tail swelled up like a raccoon's. Having finished off the morsel in the blink of an eye, perhaps it was the taste or the texture, or how it went down so smoothly, she became all the more excited. My wife offered her another piece. Again, Chibi gobbled it up in an instant. At the table from the place opposite, you could see the red tongue in her mouth curl like flame. Chibi couldn't wait for the next mouthful. Perhaps the whole process had become too tedious, too painfully slow for her. I could see her slowly close in, inch by inch, her whole being focused on her prey. Her eyes narrowed like a warrior demon guarding the gate of an ancient temple, and on front and on her front feet resting against the dining table, you could see the claws become more visible. All right now, you wait your turn, Almost before she could get the words out of her mouth, Chibi, having moved into a hunting posture, had sunk her fang deeply onto my wife's hand as she attempted to pull the shrimp away. The blood began to flow. Then a voice more of an anger than a pain burst forth, and now the spell was broken. Out! Get out! It's all over between us! The powerful impact of her voice frightened Chibi, who made a hasty retreat through the opening in the floor level window. At first, I thought it was funny that my wife addressed the little cat as if she were a close human friend, or even a lover with whom she was breaking things off. But later, I realized she meant it. That bite was for real, she said, doing her best to endure the pain. At first, I thought it was temporary, just a little spat over the shrimp. But the wound was deep. First, she closed tight the floor level window. Then, she put away the royal blue curtain, the cardboard box, the dish, and the towel which had been inside. On the next day, and the day after as well, my wife silently washed the paw prints of the large window with a piece of cloth. 3 days passed, and then, in the middle of the night, a sound came from the large window which had been shut tight. The sound was repeated over and over again, a soft, quiet sound. My wife walked over to the window from the tatami room and opened the curtain. Something was repeatedly bumping against the window with the same unchanging look in her eyes. I took a peek at my wife's notebook around the same time, and this is what she wrote. It was small and white, with white, oh my god. It was small and white, the eyes wide open, like a bird striking a lightning. Oh my, why am I fucking this sentence out? Wait, give me a second. Sorry. Got distracted and I keep fucking up a sentence. I took a I took a peek at my wife's notebook around that time, and this is what she wrote. It was small and white, with eyes wide open, like a bird striking a lighthouse. Chapter 10. A little afternoon on the day of the Tanabata festival in 1989, there was a phone call from nearby. The ambulance had arrived to pick up its passenger. With a quiet tension in the air, we went out to see them off. The old man was placed on a stretcher, then put in the ambulance. It was a clear day, and he squinted from the glare of the bright sun. The driver, wearing white gloves, folded the stretcher's leg and began a first attempt at loading it into the back of the van designed for transporting the sick and elderly. But he had the thing in backwards and had to start all over again. The tired old body, covered in summer bedding, was spun around once in the road to perform the task. A group of high school students in the navy blue school uniforms passed by, looking back over their shoulders. The old lady, carrying only a small handbag, socially greeting each of the neighbors who had come to see her off. Then the kerosene delivery man, who was normally seen only coming and going as he sold his wares, drove up in his private car to give her a lift. The old lady climbed into the front seat next to the driver, an expression restraint showing on her face as she did her best to fight back her emotions. When the two cars had disappeared over the hill, we stepped into the entrance of the main house for the first time. Now it was empty. We stood in the kitchen for a while, chatting with the woman who had worked there as a housekeeper for many years, as if to soothe the melancholy of parting. After she left, we adjusted the lock on the new gate, which had been installed for additional protection due to the lengthy amount of the time the owners would be absent. Then we went back inside the house and inspected every corner of its interior, now almost bare of any kind of furniture. From closets to shutters, a small calendar had been left behind, attached to a pillar on the living room. The date, July 7th, remains inscribed in my memory. From the veranda on the south side of the house, we were able to look out over the spacious garden. From there, it became evident that merely renting the guest house on the east side of the garden had given us no clue as to exactly how unique it was. Though the landlady had told us that we were free to stroll through the garden to which the old man had been so devoted any time we liked, we'd never gotten any farther than the eastern edge near our own house. Through the sliding glass door, we could see the figure of the old man who had been immobile, lying completely still on his bed or at times seated in a rocking chair. But the landlords were gone from the main house. The castle now was without its lord. Gazing from the veranda of the deserted house, we could see the wooden fence which acted as the boundary between the neighbors to the south had fallen into the state of advanced disrepair and tilting, and had been taken over by vines and creepers. It took some time, but gradually the old woman realized it was impossible for her to maintain the garden on her own. The years of caring for her husband had taken their toll, and little by little she had lost her drive. But even without the question of death and inheritance had become imminent, she hated the idea of becoming burden to others, not even to her own children, let alone strangers. So she saw herself growing more feeble, as she had made the firm decision the year before to put everything in order at the house where they had lived for 30 years, to move to an apartment complex for the elderly which provided nursing care. Naturally, this meant that she would have to eventually close up the rental as well. So, if nothing else, it seems fitting to make use of what time left to us to enjoy the expansiveness of the garden. When I went out to water the garden, taking hold of the hose and turning the spigot connected to the electric pump, a white-tailed skimmer dragonfly, which was always seated on the same large rock beside the pond in a good place to catch the sun, would float its pure blue body, brush lightly with a layer of white up in the air, and cautiously approach the stream of water spurting from the mouth of the hose. I placed my finger over the opening split of the stream of water in two, making the arc suspended in air, larger and higher. Now there was enough to distance so that the skimmer would not be frightened. It took flight then and approached the stream of water mid-air, kissing it like a precision machine. As this had become my habit each morning, the skimmer gradually started to fly straight for the water as soon as I began spraying, and would stay there in the waterfall which hung in mid-air for a long while. I had read in a book that The male of the species is solitary and tends to stake out a fairly extensive territory and prefers being near water. Because of this, I knew it must be the same one. Just as I was about to utter the word friend, he flew away, but I enjoyed his company while I could. A wire laundry line was awkwardly stretched between nails on the guest house and on the big house for hanging out the wash. One day near the end of August, the blue skimmer was there on the line, still young and strong, copulating with a yellow female whose tail was raised and rested on his head, so that together they formed what looked like a bracelet in the shape of a distorted heart. When I approached them for a closer look, they flew away without ever breaking formation and moved to a branch on one of the trees on the west side of the garden. Again, I drew nearer in order to observe them more closely, and again the distorted heart danced away in the sky beyond my head. Chapter 11. I continued to work in the garden for relaxation during writing breaks, cleaning reeds out of the ponds, removing cobwebs from between rocks and trees, and pulling weeds until the vast space with its full and depth was transformed. Now I was beset with the problem of how to maintain it in that condition. Once I got into the details, I ended up spending half my day there. A professional gardener or landscaper reaches a garden's overall harmony, but it did not look like I would reach that point very soon. I couldn't help thinking about the fact that within a year the house and its garden would most likely to be put up for sale. And yet, despite that knowledge, I had begun acting as if I was a live-in groundskeeper, setting up the house in a corner of the premises large enough to be a public park. I found I was frequently calling the old woman now living in an apartment for the elderly out in the suburbs to ask about every little thing. She would then ask me to look up numbers for her in the little phone book she had left behind and sent me off on all kinds of little errands like picking up documents at the local post office and so on. Each time I would ask how the old man was doing, but it seemed that he was only getting progressively worse, and he was eventually placed in the hospital attached to the elder care facility. Before she hung up, the old woman would always remind me that we were free to make use of the main house anytime we wanted. And feel free to use the air conditioner, she would say, until the familiar line changed to use the heater. It was already late fall. The old man died at the hospital. We heard the news from their daughter. Then the old woman insisted that we attend the funeral, which was to be held near the elder care facility. So we ended up invited, landlord and tenant, the big house and the guest house, a relationship which had gone on for barely 3 years, yet here we were, seated among the guests at the funeral as if we were distant relatives. I pondered on how it was things had ended up this way. There was, of course, a certain chemistry between my wife and the old woman. I don't know why, but for some reason they got along extremely well. You could certainly say the old woman was skilled at maintaining just the right distance despite living on the same premises. But after all, it's not as if we were actually family. So, on the way home from the funeral, we dropped by the Tokorozawa ballpark to take in a double header, which, as if turned out, was a decisive battle leading into playoffs. Still in the formal black funeral attire, we did the wave as a couple for the first time, but I felt that even this was according to the old lady's wishes. She would always point out to us the importance of being natural, of being ourselves. I remember one time she dropped by for one of her occasional chats with my wife, seated on the top step of the side entrance. So what if you don't have children? There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to have kids if you don't want to. Just be yourself. According to my wife, this could not have been mere consolation. There were echoes of some past misfortune which led to this insight, and yet there were no signs that she suffered excessively because of having children. All four of them whom we eventually met, both the two we had chance to meet at the house, and the ones we were introduced at the funeral, seemed to have grown into fine adults who had now established their own quite respectable households, which made the old woman's words all the more mysterious. Ever since the day out of the Tanabata festival, I would leave the sliding glass doors on the veranda of the big house open in the afternoon to keep the place aired out. I brought the old man's bedside table from the Western style room out onto the veranda to use as a desk, and sat deep down in the armchair that had originally been in the guest room, and began writing there on the veranda, in the spot which gave me a clear view out over the garden. I avoided using the air conditioner even on especially hot days. I don't like air conditioned rooms to begin with, and the structure of the house, with its extended eaves providing the shade and the open Japanese style room, did not require it. In the empty air of the old manor, with none of the usual household objects to attract notice, one felt the presence of the house itself. Since it was not my own house, I felt enveloped in the thickness of its atmosphere, the sheer power of the place. Once I was called back to the guest house to take a phone call and left the main house empty for a while. When I returned, Chibi had come over from a neighbor's garden to play, and was there inside the house. When she saw me, she quickly ran away. She never did that when she met me at the guest house. It seems a whole different relationship sprung up between us when we met in a different place. Settling into the old man's comfortable sofa at the long afternoon, I would watch the butterflies and bees buzz around the veranda. Eventually, they would steal into the darkness of the parlor, then drifting from room to room, would sometimes end up staying a long while. Once a blue admiral fluttered in, its implausible blue enhanced by its black wings, sat for a while on the edge of one of the cushions. So that's how the year passed. 1989, a year in which we entered a new era with its own new name, and summer dissolved into autumn and autumn deepened. Even at night, I continued to work amid the garden, amid the sound in the insects. The view of the Kyoto style garden, a collection of well trimmed green hemisphere all piled up on top of another, was like black and white photo in an old magazine of an author's all too perfect writing space, hence unreal. But when I thought about how this place would soon be taken from me, I became extremely anxious and began to feel pressed to clear away all the work that had piled up. Late one night, I heard the sound of someone at the front door, which should not have been opening. At the far end of the long hallway was the shadow of a man, perhaps in his 50s. While I was still unable to make out the figures in the shadows, whoever it was called my name, and apparently to offer a reassurance. I'm sorry, I meant to call first, but it was one of the old woman's son. We had met at the funeral. He was one of the directors of a company in Tokyo but lived down the coast a bit, a couple hours outside the city. Our landlady had mentioned that he might occasionally stay over if it got late. If it got to be late and he missed the train. Out on the veranda, the old man's side table overflowed with mountains of books I had collected as reference material, and piles of paper on which I had written notes and the beginnings of sentences and chapters. Aside from that, the entire house was completely empty, and the visitor was obviously at home as he removed his jacket and, somewhat inebriated, began loosening his tie. He seemed to be doing these things merely to make me feel less uncomfortable in my overly informal attire. Go ahead and keep working. Don't let me bother you, he said, quite accommodating. When I put my things together, I quickly retreated to the guest house. Chapter 12. Chibi usually behaved coolly towards human, and yet when she came over from the neighbors to the east, she seemed completely transformed, sticking her nose into every corner of the expanse of greenery, intensely focused, plunging her front feet into things, jumping and prancing and taking off running in circles at top speed as if she were completely out of control. After the old woman and the old man moved out, when none of the garden lanterns were lit and no lights were on in the house, this went on through the middle of the night till the wee hours in the morning. The garden was like a forest to Chibi. Sometimes I would go on long walks with her, watching her respond intensely to her entire surrounding, the energy rippling through her body. She would race recklessly around one particular area and then climb up high up onto one of the trees, exposing her body in midair as if about to veer off into another direction, trembling. And there I was below, taking in the whole show. So now we found ourselves in the unusual position of enjoying the full extent of the mansion and its ground without paying a penny more in rent. I could play around to my heart's content with our little guest explorer, but as time could tell, this too would have to come to an end. When the old man died in October, the old woman made yet another decision. She assembled her four children to announce it. The rapid rise in land prices in recent years, passing on the house to the children after she died, would likely carry punishing inheritance taxes. So, to avoid this, she felt it would be best to sell the property along with both houses while she was still alive. The deadline for sale was set for August 1990. Considering the inevitability of my parting with Chibi, our nightly frolics
Have
became.
you ever had a dream that you could don't do skid you don't do skid you want don't do skid.
Yes, yes, I do have a dream. Thank you. I, I do have a dream. Thank you. Considering the inevitability of my parting with Chibi, our nightly frolics became tinged with a certain sadness. I concocted some schemes that would give us the way to stay there a while longer, but then realized that most of these were no longer feasible given the rapid price inflation Japan had experienced in real estate over the past few years. It was this course of events that taught me the meaning of the word subdivision. In my mind, I drew a line from north to south that would just barely allow the guest house to remain when the property was subdivided. Sorry. If we could buy it, our life with Chibi would also be able to continue. But even a modest plot of that size would still be impossible for us to afford. Thoughts like this streamed through my head as Chibi stood by my side and just made it all the more painful. One day, all of a sudden, the house she visits is closed up. She places her front paws against the window and peers in, and the interior is dark and empty, and the entrance is boarded up. In the days that follows, she goes back to check a number of times. She presses her heads against the window glass, but no one is there. Soon, a demolition crew comes to tear down this now obsolete and disused place. But all this is no more than the imaginings of human. I began looking for a new rental in the same area at her local realtor's office, but could find nothing appropriate in the vicinity. So, placing the Zelkova at the center of the target area, gradually widening my search in an outward reaching spiral, I began searching for a new house in the vicinity that would allow us to keep Chibi. I vowed I would work even harder to find the right place for Chibi. Overhearing my Overhearing me mutter to myself, my wife smiled a wry sort of smile. Odd how you still refer her as a guest despite having become so attached. I think we are going to stop here because I believe we are now. I can do one more chapter, I think. Let's do it. Chapter 13. November 2 had passed, and the faded purple of the garden saffrons now waning. The same saffron which, back when my wife was planting its bulb, had caused Chibi to creep up on her from behind and place one paw in the hole my wife had dug as if to say, "Let's dig some more." As autumn deepened and the leaves of the Zelkova were falling thickly, we moved into a full-scale house hunting mode. At the same time, though we did not know why, Chibi's visits grew more frequent. Moreover, the time she spent with us was longer, sometimes as much as half a day. Of course, aside from eating in the cardboard box in the corner of the tatami room, the small mackerel my wife had fried for her, sitting on the desk near the window gazing out the scenery, her visits consisted primarily of sleeping. After watching her tiny figure leap past the mirror stand and slip through the gap in the hanging strips of cloth onto the pile of cushions and the upper shelf of the closet, I would leave her undisturbed for a while. Then, having judged the time to be right, my wife would take hold of one end of the hanging strips of the cloth and peek gently inside. Often, Chibi would be in the midst of grooming herself using her small, precise tongue, and would suddenly stop and look back over her shoulder at the intruder. Then, after a while, when my wife had another peek, she would be nearly asleep, eyelids sagging and her body rolled up into a ball. Given a little more time, she would be sleeping peacefully, her white belly moving up and down with her breathing. It was funny watching my wife looking between the strips of cloth to peep at Chibi. I could imagine Chibi's sleeping figures from her muffled laughter. It was really pretty funny, almost borderline weird. Chibi came and went 3 times a day, staying for around 3 hours each visit. After the neighbors, her official owners, went to sleep, she would slip through the boundary hedge and came over to this little house where the lights were still brightly lit. Then she would show that she wanted to play, and a game of ball would begin in the dark garden. After a while, she would tire of the game and in the pre-dawn hours retire to the closet and sleep. She seemed to find pleasantly comfortable in the combination of twilight nook with its human smell and softness of the cushions. The couple at work at their desks through the night would follow her lead and go to sleep. And then small guests would again awaken by 7:40 a.m. at the latest and eat food which had been prepared for her in the cardboard box and drink up the milk in the saucer placed beside it and quickly leave. Later, we learned that the reason for her morning rush was that she would always see the little boy off when he left for nursery school. Wandering in the abyss of half sleep, I would sometimes hear the spirited voice of the boy, and the mother repeatedly remind us to be careful, which the boy obviously ignored, as the two parted in the corner of the lightning alley. Despite the early hour, Chibi would always be there, standing and waiting in the corner, and then run after the boy a little way to see him off each morning. Mixed in with the voices of the mother and child would be there is the sound of Chibi's bell. This is how I knew she was there. After she finished seeing the boy off, she would continue her carefree inspection of the garden, fanning out in the broader range of ground. At various points, she would go back to her own place at the neighbor's and eat. Perhaps she had more cat naps planned for the time of day as well. Occasionally, before we even got out of bed, she would already be back over at our place asleep on the cushion in the closet, having pulled open the strips of cloth with her paw and jumped back in. After getting up late in the morning, my wife would pull open the strip of cloth and peek in at Chibi. Don't you think she really belonged to us? She seemed especially pleased about that prospect as she gazed at Chibi's sleeping figure. Eating and sleeping as much as she liked, circulating freely between locales, it seemed as if the boundary between the two households and had itself come into question. Even the words we used to talk about Chibi has become a mass confusion. Was her coming to our house a return, a homecoming, or was it the other way around? Was home really over there? The whole situation seemed to be in flux. Once we had been out for the day, we returned to Chibi there in the dim light of the entrance to welcome us, seated properly, feet together on the raised wooden floor, as if she were a young girl who had been left to care for the house while we were away. See, I told you, she's our girl. Also, my wife said, though she knew she wasn't really ours, which is why it seemed all the more as if she were a gift from afar, an honored guest bestowing her presence upon us. And this is where we are ending our chapter of The Guest Cat by Takashi Hiraide. Because it is now 2 hours and I don't want to read more than 2 hours because I will die. Thank you so much for all of you. Sorry. Thank you so much for attending the reading today. Thank you to, let me see once again. Thank you to Miku Katniss for attending this the first time, I believe. Thank you to Cicely Hartman for attending this the first time, I believe also. Thank you to Alisa Sharp Eyes. I think I've seen you before. And Agnes, yes, I know who you are. Thank you for attending the reading once again. Thank you for being here with me today. And to everyone on my Twitch channel listening to me right now, you will get a free ara ara if you follow my channel. Therefore, no reading. No worries about that. As long as you are here with me in spirit and in soul, listening to me read, I'm happy enough. I just like to read. It's as simple as that. So as long as you guys are here listening to me read, I am more than happy to be here with all of you. Also, if you know anyone who are interested in listening to someone reading a book in a very weird way, or just want something to have like in the background while they are working or studying, please share my channel with them and give me a follow. Check out my stream schedule. You can also follow me on Twitter. Let me see. I'll link my Twitter to you. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter so that you can get notification whenever I go live. I also retweet really cute stuff. I also will announce when I go live. Once again, being long-winded as I am, I stream Noodibles on every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And on Friday, I stream Noodibles, a reading event, on every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 11 a.m. GMT plus 8. On Friday evening at 7 p.m. GMT plus 8, I play Borderlands with my boys, my friends. So, if you guys are interested in my kind of content, do give me a follow on Twitch and on Twitter as well. I mean, on Twitch especially. Um, I'm one follow away. Oh my god. Thank you, as of H, for following the channel. You are my 100th follower. Congratulations. And now I have to give you an ara ara. Are you ready for it? 3, 2, 1. Ara ara, Azov-kun. There you go. Clip that, save it, do whatever you want with it. Thank you for the follow. Thank you so much. I I I I'm still not understanding why people like my content, because I feel like I do really dumb and boring content. But once in a while, I also do rating content. Um, but I don't really do announcement for that. Like, I will just go live and then tweet it out when I go live, when I do raiding content. So if you are interested in watching me raid, I actually have this thing called the raid phase, by the way. If you do not know already, this is my raid phase. So this is my face when I'm raiding, and it's pretty accurate to real life, I would say. Um, and if you, because you are a friend, thank you so much, Bit. I appreciate it. Even though my face look like this right now. This is my raid face, basically. If every time I raid, this face is on. So if you are interested in watching me raid and be super awesome at raiding, um, follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Twitch. You'll get a notification when I go live, and then you'll see how awesome I am at raiding. I'm main a summoner, but I'm also a pretty good ninja. I also clear savage content as a scholar now. Apparently I'm a scholar main now. So just so you know, just so you guys know. Anyway, thank you once again. It's lunchtime for me. I'm gonna go eat and rest and spam Agleia nonstop to get my ninja chess piece. I'll see you guys soon. I'll see you guys on next Monday. And if you're interested in watching me play first-person shooter Borderlands, do watch me tomorrow at 7 p.m. GMT plus 8. I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I love all of you. Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all with all my heart and soul. And have a great Thursday. Don't let it pull you down, and I look forward to seeing you all again on stream. See ya. Love you.